We're now on Daf Gimel and Beis, and the Gemara just adds a few words to what we saw on Daf Gimel and Aleph. Umay Zvachim, right? And we saw that Reb Shimon makes a contrast between Menachos and Zvachim, and here we have a case where Reb Shimon is being machshir shalol lishma in Zvachim because the declaration of the Kohen is obviously incorrect and deceitful, and therefore there's no contrast now between Menachos and Zvachim. Because even in Zvachim, Reb Shimon would say that Ma'aser Mochiach Alav, and therefore the Shalol Lishma does not register, and it's Olol Abaylim L'Shem Chova. The Gemara answers Rov Zvachim. In most cases of Zvachim, the onlooker could accept the declaration of the Kohen, the Shalol Lishma, without knowing the difference between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, whether it has, hair, whether it has wool on its body or it doesn't have wool on its body, whether it's a zachar or a nekeva. In most cases, the shall I say, the Kohen can get away with it, and his declaration Shalol Lishma could be accepted, and therefore we have to passel the korban. There's one case there where we had an egel and a par as far as Korban Pesach is concerned, where it's obvious that it can't be a Korban Pesach. In that case, Reb Shimon, even in Zvachim, basically the principle of Ma'aser Mochiach Alav, according to Rab and Reb Shimon, applies both to Menachos and to Zvachim. It all boils down to the question whether or not the people will take the Kohen seriously or not. Okay, now we get to Roman numeral number 2 and another approach to Rabbi Shimon. Rava Amar Lo Kasha. Remember, we started with a contradiction between two brisos. In the first brisa, Rabbi Shimon was machshir shalol lishma menachos, and the second one he admitted that it was pasul. And Lo Kasha kan bekometz mincha l'shum mincha v'kan bekometz mincha l'shum zev. When does Rabbi Shimon, according to Rava's new interpretation, accept and validate a korban mincha of Shalol Lishma? That's because the Shalol Lishma was within the membership and family of Menachos. It was from one mincha to another, like from a minchas machvas to a minchas marcheshes. But kan bekomitz mincha l'shum zevach. Imagine if at the time of the Kmitza, the Kohen makes a declaration that this is being brought as an animal for Ola, Shlamim, or Chatas, or Roshim, whatever it might be. That is a case where, on the contrary, the deceitful nature of the Kohen is obvious. This is a mincha made of flour. It's not an animal. And you can't do shechita on it. So Rava is on the exact opposite end, the other polar end of Rabbah. Whereas Rabbah says that if the declaration of the Kohen is obviously deceitful, it doesn't register at all. Rava says the more deceitful and the more obvious it is that the Kohen is saying the exact opposite of what the korban is all about, the more it passels the korban. And therefore, mincha l'shum mincha, Rava says, I'm going to derive the principle of Rabbi Shimon, that from one mincha to the other, the korban is kosher, and the Shalol Lishma for another kind of mincha does not undermine the kashrus of the korban. That's from the pasuk Vizos Toras HaMincha. Now let's put the emphasis here on the word Toras. Toras means Torah achas l'chol menachos, meaning whatever the kavana was of the Kohen, Shalol Lishma, but it was from one mincha to the other, they're all part of one entity. And that is called Torah achas chol menachos. Mincha l'shum zevach, nowhere does the Torah say, Zos Toras HaMincha v'zevach. It doesn't say Toras HaMincha v'zevach, as if to combine all zvachim into one, and therefore if he brings a korban ola l'shem shlamim, it should be ola l'bayim l'shem chova. There's no such pasuk. The word Toras only appears with regard to menachos and not with regard to zvachim. The Brisa itself explains Rabbi Shimon by saying there's also a question of whether or not the declaration of the Kohen is obviously deceitful or not. You're telling me that it depends upon whether it's all within the membership within the family of Menachos. Here's what the Tana means. This Gemara is protection of Rava. Afal gav de mechashve lo minkerehi v'tiposel zos Torah mincha Torah achas l'chol menachos. Even though the Cohen's declaration is obviously not true, because again, he's saying it's Maseches when the actual preparation of the mincha was in a machvas. Nevertheless, despite our logical conclusion that the carbon should be possible, the Torah says Zos Torah Samincha, Torah Achas L'chol Menachos. Umay, and what does it mean? Aval bezvachim eino kain. Right, in Zvachim it doesn't say Torahs. Is afagav the shchita achas lekulam, and therefore you would say that there's really no way of knowing that the Kohen is being deceitful, right? Because again, we're going according to Rava now, who says that the more obvious it is that the Kohen is deceitful, and there's no meaning to what his declaration of Shalol Lishma, the less likely the carbon should be possible. And now we would say that the carbon where in Zvachim all of the avodas are identical, therefore it should be valid. No, it's invalid. And why is it invalid? Because those Torah mincha v'zevach lo ksiv, the Torah did not add the word zevach to the pasuk of Torah mincha, and it teaches me that every zevach is a separate entity, and therefore shalol lishma in zevach, even though it's not clearly identifiable because all the avodas are identical, nevertheless it's possible. Elamiatus, the Gemara says now, according to Reb Shimon in Rava, chatos chelev sheshchato l'shem chatos dam, or l'shum chatos avodas kol chom, l'shum chatos nozil, l'shum chatos mitzoro tehei ksheira uteratze. What are you telling me, Rafa? You're telling me that it doesn't say the word Torah by Zvachim? Well, let's take chatos. The Torah says zos Torahs hachatos, which means, according to Rava's exegesis, it's Torah achas l'chol chatos. So therefore, if he has in mind, in the case of chatos A, chatos B, etc., then it should be kosher, teratza. So the Gemara says, Rab Shimon hochenami, says Ravi, you're right. Rab Shimon, since he darshins the word Torahs, in the case of Menachos, he's going to darshan the word Torahs in the case of chatos. And therefore, if the Kohen declared a shalol lishma from one chatos to another, then it's olul b'aylam l'shem chova. But l'Rabbanan, ha'amar chatos chelev sheshchato l'shem chatos dam, l'shum chatos avodas kol chavim kshera. Okay, because both of these karbanos are brought for the violation of an Isur Kares, and we'll put them together under Zos Torahs HaChatos. But L'Shem Chatos Nozil, L'Shem Chatos Mitzora Psula. If the Chatos has nothing to do with an Avera, because the Nazir is bringing, and the Mitzora is bringing his Karban Chatos as part of the process of Tara to purify himself, then Hani Olos Ba'dayunin, right? These look like two different kinds of chatos, and in the eyes of the people, they're going to start thinking, well, if you had a carbon ola and you shechted l'shem chatos, it could be kosher, because they're going to confuse it. They think that all these karbanos are very, very different with each other, and therefore we're not going to apply the principle of Torahs chatos Torah achas l'kulam. Rav Acha Breder Rav. This is a parenthetical insert here. Masir l'kula psula, meaning even in the case of a chatos l'shem dam, and the Kohen declared a shalol lishma l'shem chelev, even in that case, the Rabbanan did not apply the principle of Torahs, because they never accepted the exegesis of Torahs. It's l'shem, and also the Torah says v'shochat oso l'chatos. And what's the extra word? Oso l'shem oso chatos. The carbon has to be brought for that particular chatos, which was incurred by a violation of chelev and not by a violation of dam. Now we're up to the third interpretation of Rabbi Shimon, and that's Rav Ashi Omer. Again, we're trying to reconcile the two brises as to when Rabbi Shimon held that shalol lishma menachos is kosher and olol l'shem bayim lo kasher. Kan bekometz machvas l'shum marcheshes. Okay, so Rabbosai, now in Ravashi, we're going back to that distinction between the vessel generating this same carbon, which, as we said, what was the principle machshava b'mona lo pasla, as opposed to the machshava of the person. When does Reb Shimon hold that shalol lishma is still kosher to all of v'aylam l'shem chova? That's only b'machvas l'shum marcheshes. He's pointing to the machvas, and he's saying that the machvas should have a designation of marcheshes. I'm going to skip a line for a split second, and the Gemara says that's called b'mana kamachashev umachshava b'mana lo pasla. However, the second brisa, where Rav Shimon concedes that shalol lishma pasels in, and when I say pasel, I mean partial pasel. It's not all about chova in menachos. That's bekomitz minchas machvas l'shum minchas marcheshes. Here, the emphasis on the mincha that's being brought by the person, and he changes the whole nature of the mincha. And even Reb Shimon would hold, like we saw in Rava against Rabbah, that we don't apply the principle the way Rabbah applied it of Maisa Mochiach Alav, and the Kohen's declaration would passel the mincha because he goes from one mincha to another. And according to Rav Ashi, we're not going to dash in Torahs the way Rabbah did. Is machvas l'shumar cheshes b'mona komachashi machshav b'mona lo pasla. It's ridiculous. What the Kohen said is absolutely absurd. That the mana, the kli, the vessel itself, should determine the nature of the carbon. A kli doesn't determine the nature of the carbon. But minchas machvas l'shuv minchas marcheshes, if he changes the whole entity of the carbon from one category of mincha to another, is b'mincha de pasla b'machshava kamachashev. That is a psul of shalol lishma, and that is the subject of the second brisa of Rav Shimon. Frek the Gemara, the same kasha we objected to Rava, we're now going to object to Rav Ashi. Vatana, the brisa says, Mipnei maseh mochicha leka omar. How are you going to interpret the words of Rav Shimon, which Rava took very seriously, but Rava and Rav Ashi refused to take it seriously? Hachikama, this is what it means. Afal gav de machshava de lo minkarhi. This carbon should be invalid. Why? Because everybody sees that this is really a false thing when he changes it from minchas marcheshes, minchas chatos, umay, right? And therefore, ti posel, but we're going to say no. Just 1 second. It's going to be kosher, right? Ti posel means in the Havamina we think it was possible because he's changing the nature of the mincha. But the answer is that since in the first brisa he talks about the intention of the vessel, which is again absolutely ridiculous, therefore it doesn't register and it doesn't pass the korban. My aval bezvachim eino kain, and what's the contrast to zvachim? Afal gav de shchita achas lekulam. Even though all the avodas are equal in all the zvachim, and zrika achas lekulam, kabal achas lekulam, zvicha, right? Is bezvicha. Why is there shalol lishma in zvicha? Is bezvicha the pasal be machshava kamachashe? Right? We're not talking about a case where he points to the kli and he says the vessel should determine the nature of the carbon, but rather he's saying that my machshava is for this or for that, for an olah, for a shlamim, etc., etc. That certainly passes the carbon, and that's called bizvachim eino kain, because there's no real parallel. You see, it's interesting. When it says bizvachim eino kain, it's not really a conceptual contrast between menachos and zvachim. Just in menachos, you could talk about the kli, the mana. In the case of zvachim, there is no parallel of mana. Amalei Ravacha Breda Ravler of Ashi Charev Mishum Blula, my Omar Reb Shimon. Why did Reb Shimon say that if the Noder had in mind a chareva, and the Kohen got up and he declared that the mitzvah is being done for a blula, right? For a blula means it got shemen mixed in, and Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. Obviously, these are two types of karbanos. It's no different than machvas and marcheshes, so therefore it should be a psul of shalol lishma. Amalei. So Rav Ashi responds to this attack and he says, Lishum bila bi alma. The Kohen didn't actually get up and say that the shalolish, right, in his declaration, shalolish, he didn't actually say that this is for a carbon mincha blua. He left out the word mincha. He just said blua. Blua can mean anything in the world that's mixed with, mixed with oil, right? I can go into my kitchen and I mix flour with oil and it becomes blua. So in such a case, the Kohen is saying something absurd, and therefore the Shalol Lishma declaration is meaningless. What happens in a case where a person brings a carbon ola and the Kohen declares l'shum shlamim, let it be for the sake of a shlamim? He didn't say a carbon shlamim. He left out the noun and he just said shlamim. Shlamim means peace. Let it be for peace. Peace now. You remember that? So the Gemara answers, Hachi hashta. There's a fundamental difference between blila and shlamim. Hasam zevach gufek li shlamim. The Torah used the word shlamim to describe the zevach, and therefore the word shlamim doesn't refer to peace, it refers to a category of karma. And I'll quote to you two psukim to prove it. Right? It doesn't say carbon shlamim, it says shlamim, but the word shlamim means a carbon shlamim. Azorik is dama shlamim. But hacha mincha gufa mi ikre blula, you won't find anywhere in the Torah that just the word mincha alone would indicate a carbon mincha blula. B'chol mincha blula b'shemen ksiv. The Torah always adds the word blula b'shemen, right, to describe the mincha. It says mincha blula b'shemen. So the word blula itself could mean anything. It could mean what I did in my kitchen when I mixed oil with flour. Because when the Torah speaks about blula, it adds the noun mincha. It's a mincha described by the adjective blula. The Gemara now wants to analyze why each of the three approaches to Reb Shimon, whether it's Rava, Rabba, or Rav Ashi, rejects the other. Klulu karabalo amri. Why is it that both Rava and Rav Ashi rejected Rabba, and you and I, our heart is with Rabba because that's a simple, straightforward understanding of Reb Shimon? The Adarav machshava de mincher pasla amod. They have the opposite polar extreme understanding that the more that the Kohen is obviously deceitful, the more it is pogame in the carbon against Rama. Kiravalo Amri, why didn't they accept the difference between one mincha for another mincha, as opposed to zvachim, one zevach for the other? Because those Torahs lo mashmalei, they didn't accept that exegesis that the word Torah means we equate all the menachos. Kirav Ashi lo Omrai. Why didn't they like the shita of Rav Ashi to differentiate between the mincha that was for the sake of marcheshes or for the sake of minchas marcheshes? Right? It makes a difference whether it's the mana that he had in mind or the carbon itself. Mishum kushya de Rav Acha berei de Rava. We had the objection of Rav Acha, and he said that in the case of a neder to bring a mincha chareva, and the Kohen got up and said he had in mind the mincha blula, that the carbon is kosher. I mean, the Gemara again tried to give an answer, but these Amoraim never accepted that answer. So the kash is better than the teretz. Again, whether you go to one extreme and you say that the more obvious the Kohen's declaration is deceitful, it is a reason to disqualify and completely omit the Kohen's declaration, or the opposite, that the more it's obviously deceitful because it's the opposite of korban, therefore it passes the korban. That was a suffix in the mind of Rav Oshia, the boy Rav Oshia, the Amri the boy Mine Rav Oshia Rav Asi, Mincha L'shum Zevach. Here we turn to Daf Dalid. Mali Omer Rabbi Shimon. What would Rabbi Shimon say about a mincha? And the Kohen said it's for the purpose of a zevach. So again, that's obviously deceitful, and it's sheker v'chazov because zevach would be an animal and not flour. But on the contrary, maybe that's goof for the reason why it should passel. So Rav Oshaya vacillated about this point. And the Gemara is going to go on to say that you're trying to analyze the shita of Rav Shimon. We don't understand Rav Shimon at all. And that's what we're going to pick up tomorrow on Daf Dalet. So thank you for being with me today.